something that's kind of a really home style dish. When chefs like to cook at home, we want to cook pretty simply. So we have ingredients like potatoes, carrots, pork shoulder. We're going to use some purity organic apple juice. I love kind of the natural pressed apple juice that's kind of feels like apple cider. Those are great fall flavors. We're going to use some mulling spices. Mulling spices are all kinds of cinnamon, star anise, clove, kind of things you associate with mulled cider, right? So this makes sense. Pork, mulled cider, really good. And the other thing when I'm cooking at home that really works for me is I don't have any dishwashers at home. So I mean, I have a dishwasher, but I have to get my hands dirty. And so, you know, you start to think about how to cook at home, making one-pot meals, making things that don't require as much pots and pans and as much cleanup. And really, when you're able to cook that way, you're able to spend more time enjoying the food that you're preparing and enjoying the people that you're eating it with. So first thing we're going to do, so every recipe has its stages, right, is we're going to start with the roasted potatoes. So we're going to roast these potatoes separately and then use them to lay over the top of this one-pot meal. So these are just fingerling potatoes, nice waxy, buttery kind of potato. You could use other potatoes if you wanted to. You could even use something like a sweet potato, but I prefer to use these in this application. You'll notice I'm just kind of cutting the ends off. Some of the ends will be slightly discolored with potatoes. They do grow in the dirt in the ground, so that does happen. And I'm kind of just roughly cutting them into the same size. You're going to see that a lot where in cooking, if you take something, you know, potatoes that are different sizes and you make them roughly the same size. So these are now like this. This potato is slightly larger. I'm going to cut this. And so now roughly these are all equal, which means they're going to cook at the same time or in the same amount of time. And so it's just a little thing where it can be a very important aspect to make sure that all these potatoes are all cooked the same amount of doneness for the same amount of time in the oven roasting. And these little ends here I'll just discard. With the potatoes, we're going to use some rosemary. We've got some leaves already picked here. Rosemary is a great plant because it's something you can plant out in your yard or in your garden, and it'll just kind of take care of itself for the most part. It doesn't need a lot of water. It's always there. You can run out and cut a branch off and use it, and I would highly suggest planting your own rosemary bush. You'll have more trouble almost killing it or cutting it back than you ever will worrying about how much it's going to grow for you. So you always have fresh rosemary that you can use. And who doesn't like rosemary and potatoes? Rosemary, and I'll sprinkle it in. Okay, and then got some olive oil. Now, every recipe you'll ever read will have a certain amount of olive oil, as does this one. That's supposed to be into something, but I kind of just do this. So, you know, you figure that's a tablespoon or so. When you're confident and you're cooking in the kitchen all the time, you'll be pretty confident in how much you're adding and know where the line is. I mean, I'm never trying to add more oil than is necessary, but or more fat than is necessary, but certainly don't want to go under what's necessary. So this is a little coarse sea salt. Toss these in the bowl, just get them all coated. And then I'm going to lay them out on a tray with parchment and roast them in the oven at 350 degrees. So I said this was a one-pot meal, and so what I want to do next is work on my vegetables. I've got some carrots here. These are just sort of the, you know, we could use fancy baby carrots or all different colored carrots if you'd like, or, you know, these are just sort of organic orange carrots that you should be able to find really easily. And this cut that I'm doing on it is called an oblique. It's one of the first things they sort of teach you in culinary school. And this cut was designed, if you see, again, we're talking about a vegetable that's a different size and diameter between the tip here and the top. So this is thinner and then this is thicker. So this cut is designed, as you can see here, to take this vegetable of varying degrees of thickness and turn it all into something that's the same size. And again, we're going back to having the same reasoning, is that we want these pieces of carrot to cook at the same time and all be done at the same time. So that's sort of what this cut was developed for. It's also turned something like this into relatively aesthetically pleasing vegetable. The other thing I have to go with this are some cipollini onions. Now, if you couldn't find cipollini onions, you could certainly use pearl onions. That's another pretty commonly available small onion. And if you couldn't find those, you could use a regular onion. And you would just want to cut it into relatively similar sized pieces. These have all been peeled. And then I have this casserole. So again, I'm going to do the olive oil trick, which is to put, a tablespoon or so into this casserole. And the first thing we're going to do, nice and hot. It's been preheating, so kind of over medium heat. We go ahead and add the carrots. Now there's just something too, if we're making, this will end up sort of being a one-pot stew. We're gonna add the onions in here. There's just something to a vegetable that has touched a pan in this way as opposed to just being lowered into the broth later. That seems more appealing to me. And I think part of what that is that as chefs, essentially what we're doing most of the time is moving water around. So in these vegetables, they have a certain amount of water in them, and you can see the steam coming off of here. I'm taking water out of these carrots, which means I'm intensifying the flavors that are naturally in the carrots and sweetening the sugars that are there, which will lend more flavor to our overall dish. And as a chef, basically my job is to develop flavor in the best way that I know how. I'm gonna go ahead and put on gloves. I have a pretty strict rule in my kitchen about touching protein with gloves. There's a couple reasons for that. First reason is sanitation. And you've noticed that I've done a certain amount of my prep work ahead of time, where there would be, if I'm gonna put something raw into this board, I wouldn't wanna go back and put something that I wasn't going to cook on it. So this is pork shoulder. A pork shoulder is kind of an underappreciated cut. A lot of times it's used to make ground pork or barbecue, or, but realistically it's a pretty inexpensive cut, one that you could readily find. And then out of this shoulder I'm going to cut some steaks. And again, this is really just simplicity. By cutting these steaks, we're going to braise them whole, and then you could go back and you'd be able to slice this as a braise, as opposed to, say, cubing this all now into smaller pieces. We'll just do something nice and simple with it. This is about 2 pounds of pork. I have some mulling spices right here, so I'm going to take and season the pork with. This will give a nice fragrance to it. With some salt. Pat that in. Flip them over. And with a bit of salt. Okay. While that's resting here, got some ginger. Now I'm not going to worry about this because I'm going to cook both this ginger and this garlic, so I'm not going to worry about chopping it here on this board that's already had the pork on it. I can actually maybe even just crush these, because we're going to chop it up. And again, this can be fairly rough. We'll go through it a little bit more than that, but you get the ginger. The ginger has obviously been peeled. I imagine you could probably eat ginger skin, although I don't know that I ever have. So as I'm preparing my pork and slicing the steaks, seasoning them, I'm browning the vegetables lightly here in the pan next to me. Doing my chopping. So this is really the way that we're taught to cook as chefs, is to sort of work through a recipe the same way that I'm showing you right now, is to do it in the least amount of time. So, and all this multitasking, having your mise en place ready, having all these ingredients in front of me is what allows you to do that in the fastest possible time, and to get your dinner on the table. So that's what we do, professional kitchens every day, and it's what, when we're designing recipes as chefs, that we want to achieve those results for you. So as I'm chopping, my pork is here resting, waiting to go into the pan. I'm going to go ahead and take these vegetables out here shortly. So we'll go ahead and do that. We've already got our potatoes in the oven. So again, a little shake. You can see all the steam, all the caramels and the flavors that we've developed. So I'm going to go ahead at this point just remove these vegetables to rest. Go back in with some additional olive oil. Okay, now our pan has the benefit of already being preheated. Go ahead and take the pork. You can already and the beauty is that by having the pan preheated with the vegetables already cooked in it, we now don't have to wait. We go right into the next step of cooking. So what I'm looking to do is get a decent amount of color onto this pork, because this is the one time when I can really do that. After this, we're going to add wet ingredients and vegetables and transfer this to the oven. So if I don't develop color on it now, I won't really have the opportunity to do so later. And all this color that we're starting to develop, these are the caramels and the flavors that are really going to build the depth of flavor in the dish later. My garlic and my ginger that was chopped, I'm going to sprinkle it over and around. I can already smell just a light garlic and ginger fragrance coming. And so if you ever had raw garlic when you didn't want to, we're sort of cooking off those volatile aromas. This is a little tomato paste. A lot of people think color in a broth or a stock comes from roasting something, but a lot of times what that color is coming from is tomato product. And this tomato product is going to give us a nice, rich, deep color to the broth that we're going to create here. This is a bit of white wine we're going to deglaze with. And then we're going to go in with our cider. It's good to use a product like this that has, this is 100% juice, there's no sugar, so this isn't going to end up being something that's too sweet. So I'm just going to distribute this tomato paste in the broth. You can already see that sort of deep brownish color that's starting to come, and that's going to be to our benefit later. So it's coming up to a simmer. I'm going to go ahead and, this is some chicken stock. You could use water if you'd like. And we want to add a few cups just to cover the pork. Then the next step, we're going to bring this up to a simmer, and then we're going to place it in the oven. Okay, we've got our pork that's been in the oven about 45 minutes. And we're just going to put it back here on the stovetop for a few minutes to thicken the liquid. And I like to use cornstarch to do this. Part of that reason is, you know, we need a certain amount of natural gelatin will come out of the pork shoulder itself, but not quite enough to have like we would have a veal stock or a reduction stock in a restaurant kitchen. So the way to approximate this at home that really works easily and doesn't add really any extra fat keeps the recipe pretty healthy is to take this liquid, use a little bit of cornstarch. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit of cold water. Cold water is definitely what you want to use for this. If you put hot water in here, it'll start to activate the cornstarch and it'll already be thickened. So we just create this little slurry. It's just about an equal amount of water to the amount of cornstarch. We're going to stir it up so that it's all dissolved. With the liquid at a light simmer here, we go ahead and pour this over and in so that it distributes. And you're going to see immediately that there's a thickening that happens to this broth. And that's going to provide nice glazing of the pork and some great sort of mouthfeel to the finished dish. At this point, I'm also going to go ahead and add our vegetables, which we took out. Now, if we would have added these in the beginning, the carrots would all be overcooked, the onions would be mush. So this is a little trick where we're adding these when the pork liquid has already been thickened and the pork is mostly tender. Now we're going to return this back to the oven uncovered for another 10 to 20 minutes to reduce the flavor a bit more and to finish cooking. Okay, at this point, our pork braise is cooked 20 minutes more. You can see the viscosity of the liquid glazes the vegetables and the pork. Got some chopped flat leaf parsley I'm going to add just now. Use a spoon and stir through. These flavors are really savory and sweet, mulling spices. Incredible liquid. This would be great with polenta or potatoes like we have here. These are the roasted potatoes. And so again, we have all this, we have the sauce, we have the richness, we have all this glaze and all these things happening in this casserole. So potatoes are a light addition that can add at the last minute here to complete our dish. If you wanted to, you could serve the dish right in this vessel, right out at the table. And you get the benefit of having something that feels kind of like steaky with the large chunks of pork, but soft and tender like a braised, kind of soothing and warm.